My ex-boyfriend found out the truth behind my cheating, and he's extremely upset now. I gotta be straight up from the get-go. Trying to explain what went down in the title ain't easy. Let me make it clear right off the bat. It ain't what it sounds like, and this tale's gonna take a while. Alright, so when I was 14, things were finally looking up after a rocky start to life. Lost my dad, dealt with some serious bullying at school, yada yada yada, had a real tough time. But then things took a turn. I found my groove at school, connected with a solid group of friends, and not long after, met this guy who eventually became my first boyfriend. Tomas, he's 34 now, just like me. Life was good, man. Felt like I finally fit in somewhere. School was going all right, I had a job, and every now and then, me and my crew would hit the road for a weekend getaway. We'd head out from our little corner of Argentina and make our way to either the coastal city or the capital, just a couple of hours drive away. And let me tell you, those trips were something else. See, we were huge fans of our local rock bands, and catching their gigs was the highlight of our month. Jumping around in the mosh pit, jostling our way to the front row, belting out the lyrics at the top of our lungs, you name it, we did it. Might not sound like much, but trust me, those were the days. So when I hit 16, me and my crew decided to head to the big city to catch a gig by one of our all-time faves, Caballeros, at this spot called Cromañón. I ain't gonna go into detail, but let's just say it turned into one of the darkest nights in rock history. Loads of folks got hurt, and sadly, 2 of my closest buds didn't make it. Left me with this gnarly scar on my thigh that still reminds me of that mess. After that, things got real rough. I started hitting the bottle hard every weekend, trying to drown out everything. Couldn't even bring myself to talk about what went down that night. Any mention of it and I'd bolt out of there, acting like everything was cool, like I was cool. Oh, and getting booze as a kid in Latin America? Piece of cake, especially in my little town. Plus, we had this thing where Thursdays were party nights for some reason. And you know how it is down here. Parties don't wrap up till the crack of dawn. So yeah, Fridays at school I'd roll in half-crocked, but nobody batted an eye cause, that was just the norm. Tomas stood by me through it all, being my rock. He'd work his butt off just to see me smile, gently nudging me to open up without pushing too hard, and wrapping me in his arms when I needed it most. Our bond only grew stronger, even as I sank deeper into darkness. After graduation, we both moved to the same city for further studies. That's when I decided to stop fooling myself. I grabbed a part-time gig, hit the books hard, made new friends, and toned down the partying. Thought I had it all figured out, or at least wanted to believe I did. But as time went on, I realized I was far from okay. By the time we hit our 20s, I found myself drowning in booze again. Self-loathing consumed me, haunted by nightmares of that dreadful night. I felt guilty for feeling this way, like I should be grateful just to be alive. It felt pathetic. Back then, mental health wasn't something folks talked about much. Therapy was a no-go zone, and in the midst of it all, I started treating Tomas like garbage. I never laid a hand on him, but I'd lash out, hurling hurtful words his way whenever he tried to help. I kept pushing him away, convinced he deserved better. Tomas, he was like an angel, always there no matter what. I couldn't understand why he stuck around, but he did, and that just made me feel even worse. When he stumbled upon me, sprawled out on the floor from too much booze, he'd scoop me up, clean me up, tuck me into bed, whip up some grub, and tidy up my place. But instead of feeling grateful, it just made me feel even lower. Here I had this amazing guy, and I was treating him like dirt. He deserved way better than me. I tried to break it off, told him we needed to split, but Tomas wasn't having any of it. He swore he'd stick by my side no matter what. But as time passed, I just kept spiraling downward, dragging him along with me, and the thought of him being dragged into my mess was unbearable. So after a lot of thinking, I made a choice. I did the one thing I knew he wouldn't forgive. I lied to him, said I cheated with a guy from work, someone he was always wary of. It tore him up, anger, sadness, betrayal, the whole shebang. Seeing him like that broke my heart, but I knew it was for the best. He was better off without me, and I was just dead weight dragging him down. So he walked out on me, and after that he was gone. I didn't reach out, didn't even try to find him, though deep down I wanted to. After I finished school, I landed a full-time gig and got fed up with feeling like crap all the time. That's when my mum put me in touch with other survivors. Just so you know, a lot of us survivors either took our own lives or came darn close. We all struggled big time with our mental health, as you can imagine. They convinced me to give therapy a shot. Quitting drinking was tough, let me tell you. Finally facing reality and tackling my issues head-on was a real struggle, but it was worth it. There were so many nights I'd stare at my phone, wondering if I should call Tamaz. I wanted to come clean about the lie, to apologize for everything, and to thank him for all he'd done. I gotta admit, Tamaz did try to check in on me a few times, but I always ignored his calls. Heard plenty of voicemails from him when he was drunk, asking how I could do what I did, but he'd still say he loved me and ask how I was doing. I made myself promise to never pick up. As time passed, Tamaz's calls dwindled, and I slowly started feeling like my old self again. I dipped my toes back into the dating scene, started having more fun, and eventually tied the knot and became a mom to a beautiful daughter. Life was on the upswing for me, but as they say, what goes up must come down. My husband ended up cheating on me. Karma's a real piece of work, isn't it? I kicked him to the curb, got myself a house, and won primary custody of our daughter. She's been my shining light through it all. Even when things have been tough lately, I've never let myself sink back into that dark place. For her sake, I'll always keep my head held high. And you know what? Despite all the ups and downs, I'm happier now than I've ever been. So about 5 months back, Tamaz slid into my DMs on Instagram out of the blue. We started chatting, catching up on life. Turns out he's got a kid too, a 5-year-old son from a one-night thing, though he's not with the mom. They've got this co-parenting thing down pat, with him having his son 2 weeks a month. We started hanging out again, at first just as pals. But things took a turn and we ended up hooking up. Went on a few dates, but we never broached the topic of the cheating. Then one day, I spilled the beans about my feelings for him resurfacing. Tamaz admitted he felt the same, but he wasn't sure if he could jump back into something with someone who'd cheated. That's when I decided to come clean about everything, about the past, about my feelings, about not wanting to drag him down with me. That's why I spun that lie about cheating in the first place. Tamaz was shocked. He stormed off in a huff, leaving me reeling. Later on, he rang me up and gave me an earful. Said I shouldn't have spun that lie about cheating, that I should have just been straight with him if I didn't want to be with him anymore. I tried to explain my side again, told him I'd rather he think the worst of me, be sad for a bit, but eventually move on, than drag him into my dark pit. But Tamaz wouldn't hear it. He said he was a grown-up who could make his own choices, and all he wanted was to be there for me. I let him know I didn't regret what I did, but I did apologize for hurting him. Then I hung up, and we haven't spoken since. He tried calling me yesterday, but I wasn't ready to face him yet. Still trying to process everything that's happened. Looking back, I used to think I was doing him a favor with all this mess. Even though it hurt him, I believed it was for his own good. Plus, I didn't exactly see myself as relationship material. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I do know it wasn't the right way to handle things, but I couldn't bring myself to push him away outright. I had this feeling he could have talked me into staying no matter what. Update. Sadly, my post ended up in a sea of red pill incels and pesky bots who either didn't bother reading or just couldn't grasp what I was saying. Truth be told, I didn't really bother diving into those comments. Didn't expect much helpful advice from that crowd anyway, though I did manage to snag a few nuggets, which I'm grateful for, honestly. But let's get one thing straight. When I talked about the Cromagnon tragedy, it was purely for context. That was over 19 years ago, for crying out loud. I only mentioned it to paint a picture of where I was mentally, how my thoughts were churning, and what I was going through. I'd never dream of seeking advice on something like that from Reddit. Come on now. Be serious about the love of God. I'm saying this to all those armchair psychiatrists and psychologists who tried to diagnose me based on a Reddit post. It might have been well-intentioned, but it's dangerous and downright irresponsible. Just to set the record straight, I don't have PTSD. After graduating from university, I sought professional help and managed to break free from that dark place 13 years ago. Saw my fair share of psychiatrists and psychologists, and not once was PTSD mentioned. I did battle with depression and anxiety though. Let me tell you, the pain I felt after that tragedy was indescribable, and it only got worse because I didn't seek help right away. It was a long and hard road, but with years of therapy and support from loved ones, I eventually found my way back to myself. Not completely, mind you, but I reached a point where I no longer recognized the person I used to be. To those who called me toxic, well, I guess I was at some point. But the real problem wasn't other people, it was my own self-destructive behavior. I thought pushing everyone away was the answer, but that was ages ago. I've come a long way since then, and I'm nowhere near that place anymore. Let me say it again. I wouldn't be so reckless as to jump into another relationship, get hitched, and have a kid. When Tamaz and I got back together, it felt like those early days of our relationship, healthy, fun, and brimming with love. Not like that last year we spent together, which was hands down the worst year of my life. I've hashed it out in therapy for years, and I've put it behind me a long time ago. It's just a chapter in my past now, something that left its mark but doesn't define me. Sure, it left me with a bunch of issues, but hey, it is what it is. I made it through, and I should count my blessings for that. So to cut to the chase, Tamaz and I had a meet-up last Saturday, and things went pretty smoothly. We ended up having this marathon chat, going on for hours about everything under the sun. He opened up about the pain he went through, how rough those months post-breakup were, and how it felt like I'd made the decision for him. I explained to him that I wasn't just thinking about him, but also about myself in all of this. Back then, being in a relationship just wasn't in the cards for me. How could it be? I was grappling with all sorts of trauma, and I wasn't exactly a ray of sunshine to be around. I laid it out for him, how he might have wanted to stick it out, but I didn't want him to. I reminded him about all those times I tried to call it quits, but he wouldn't hear of it. I apologized for putting him through that, but he countered with how much he loved me, how he couldn't bear to leave me in that state. Even when he thought I'd cheated, he was scared I might do something drastic. Every time news broke about a Cro-Magnon survivor taking their own life, he'd freak out, fearing it might be me. I made sure he knew how much I loved him then and now, but for me, staying in that relationship just wasn't healthy. It was toxic, and it wouldn't have done either of us any favors. We both said our sorries, and I made it clear that I wanted to leave all the baggage behind and just focus on us moving forward. He was on board with that plan. There were tears, sure, but they were tears of relief and joy. It had been a while since I felt this happy. Deep down, I think it's what I've always wanted since we split up, to be okay again, to go back to how things used to be. I reckon I never really stopped loving him, and it seems he never stopped loving me either. I used to wonder where he was, if he was all right, and what might have been if things had played out differently. But now I don't have to wonder anymore because we're together again, and that's all that really matters. Still, we're taking it one step at a time.